I'm going to show you guys White Oak Pastures, which is our family farm near Bluffton, Georgia. White Oak Pastures has been in my family for 152 years.
On this episode of Grow, we're going on a Jeep tour of a farm in South Georgia that's world-renowned for animal welfare and environmental stewardship.
Part of my farm that I enjoy most is the fact that in the 152 years we've come full circle from a farming style that was very focused on animal welfare and the land, focused on the land and the animals, to a very industrial, commoditized, centralized form of agriculture. And now back to focus on the welfare of the animals, the regeneration of the land, and the local rural economy.
So White Oak Pastures is unique in a few different ways. There are several farms that are raising animals in a really great environment. There are several farms that are raising multiple species of animals in a great environment. There are several farms that are thoughtfully grazing and healing the earth, by creating better soils. This is not, White Oak Pastures is not unique in any of those senses. The things that I think White Oak Pastures might be unique in is the scale in which we're doing it. So we are raising animals at a scale that allowed us to build our own processing plants on the farm under USDA inspection, and then further integrating our production model with a zero waste mindset. So when we slaughter an animal, nothing goes to waste. The fats are rendered and turned into candles and soaps. Hides are tanned and turned into bags and shoes. Those types of things, that product variety or that zero waste management makes White Oak Pastures really unique.
The way we have farmed the land in this country with intense cultivation, land disturbance, intense use of chemical fertilizers, intense use of pesticides has caused the degradation of the land. By that I mean loss of organic matter, loss of microbial life. It's become instead of being a very productive, living medium, it's a dead mineral medium. That's what happens when you use intense cultivation and chemical fertilizer and pesticides. So our kind of farming, which is holistic animal management on the land, rebuilds that microbial activity and organic matter, which is carbon, and this water holding capacity.
When you think about what we do, it's a step above hunter-gatherer. We're raising animals, we're slaughtering them on the farm, butchering them, and then selling them to passionate people who care. We're utilizing the entire carcass just as generations past did, because that was all they had. So that radically traditional farming is a very special 3 words that I think describes what we do really well. The other one is a bold return to giving a damn.
If you look back over the history of farming, from the time the first man put the first seed in the ground intentionally or caught the first animal to attempt to domesticate it, the changes in farming over that millennia would be very gradual, just very gradual. And the very change from decade to decade or century to century, very little. Post-World War II, it went up exponentially. Post-World War II was like a perfect storm when a lot of things came together. And the ability was there and the desire was there to change agriculture quickly and suddenly. We could talk about it all day long. And we could talk about what those changes are all day long, but they fell in the category of commoditization, industrialization, and centralization. And those changes were made for noble cause. Europe was starving. There was a need for cheap, abundant, safe food. And the industrialization, centralization, commoditization made that possible. It was wildly successful.
Supermarket, symbol of the high standard of living in this country today. These products come from farms and ranches despite distance and season. They are the result of a miraculous agriculture. Tremendous advances on the farm and in the marketing system have created this miracle. The miracle whereby American agriculture has advanced more in the space of a single lifetime than world agriculture had in more than 7,000 years. Today, agriculture is going far beyond nature to produce new miracles for an even better, more abundant life.
It made food, I'm going to say, obscenely cheap and wastefully abundant. And the safe part is really probably more in the acute sense of the word. It was very impactful. But there were a lot of unintended consequences. And most of the unintended consequences were undesirable consequences. And most of those unintended, undesirable consequences fell on the backs of the welfare of the animals, and the degradation of the land, and the impoverishment of rural America. All the rural towns throughout America, probably the world, but certainly America, the more industrial and commoditized agriculture became, the more irrelevant the town became, the more economically impoverished it became. In our little town, Bluffton, we had reached the point that there was no businesses left in town, zero. The only thing you could buy in Bluffton was a stamp at the post office.
At whatever point, people just kind of forgot or chose not to focus on the consequences of what we do every day. No matter how big or small, for every action, there's a reaction. And we got away from that. So defining what we do as giving a damn is really a powerful thing. You know, we're thoughtful. You know, when my brother-in-law's moving the big herd of cows, and that's a really special thing. We've been planning this move for a very long time. And where they move next in 3 or 4 days is thoughtfully planned. You know, they will impact the land in a way that was thoughted. You know, that's important, that plays a part or a role in a bigger story.
So in our prescriptive grazing program, we move the herd every 3 days. The reason for that is to give the grass a maximum amount of recovery time and eat it down from big in 3 days to very short. Then it'll be 60 days, 2 months before the cattle get back on it. That maximizes the amount of forage we can produce per acre per year. It offers the cattle a really palatable, highly nutrient-dense forage for them to eat. It also stays ahead of internal parasite cycles like the brown stomach worm. You move the animals away before the eggs pupate and neonates climb up to reinfect the cows. You stay ahead of all that. And also it helps with external parasites like horn flies and face flies. The cattle move on off to the next pasture before they're hatched. This has been going on since the first mammals walked the face of the earth. it's nature, it's evolution. We try to get away from it, but you can't. So microbes live in the soil. Microbes feed the soil, that feed the plant, that feed the herbivores, that defecate and urinate and feed the microbes, that feed the soil, that feed the plant. And while that's going on, you've got predators pushing those herbivores so they don't stand on the same piece of property, reinfecting themselves with parasites and insects and overgrazing the land and turning it into desert, because they would if they weren't moved. The predators move the herbivores, and that could be wolves moving buffaloes, it could be lions moving wildebeest, it could be polar bears moving caribou. It depends on the ecology, but the fundamentals are the same. Predators moving herbivores, eating the plants, feeding the microbes, feeding the soil, feeding the plants, feeding the herbivores, feeding the predators. And that's what we do here. It's biomimicry. We emulate that. We do everything just the way I just said it. The predators are us, me and my people. We move the herbivores. That's the cattle. You see that? This is cow manure. We own a rotational grazing program, so the cattle grazed in this field about 10 days ago. We grazed it down to short, nice recovering. But this is where one defecated. You see that dirt around the edges, that's dung beetles. And dung beetles are a very fragile insect. They say much pesticide and they go away, much cultivation, they go away. But they're a very important, I'm gonna say essential part of the natural cycle here. And those cattle, that cow defecated, it would have immediately drawn horn flies and face flies who would have laid their eggs in there. And those eggs would have hatched and preyed upon, they sucked bloodsuckers, preyed on the cows. But when those dung beetles aerated that manure, it rendered that pat of manure as an undesirable place for the larva to grow. So you don't have as many flies. Same is true with internal parasites, a brown stomach worm that would infect that cow. When she defecated, there would have been eggs from that brown stomach worm in that feces. And that egg would pupate, and a little baby worm called a neonate would climb up a blade of grass. Another cow would bite it, and it would reinfect. But by virtue of the fact that we move the cattle through here every 3 days, we move them before that neonate got it. So by the time that neonate got there, the cattle were gone on some clean, fresh grass somewhere. That wouldn't happen in a normal cattle production system, but in our rotational grazing system, it emulates nature. We don't have to use a pesticide on the cows to get rid of the worms. We don't have to spray the cows to get rid of the flies. An essential element of the industrialization of agriculture, that's the creation of the factory farm model, is putting different species of animals or plants into monocultural silos. Only pigs on the pig farm, only chickens on the chicken farm, only carrots at the carrot farm. There may be some rotation, but it's monocultural production, which flies in the face of nature. Nature abhors a monoculture. Nature won't have it. Nowhere in nature do you have a forest that's just oak trees or an ocean that's just one kind of fish nature wants a smorgasbord of many different microbial and plant and animal species living in symbiotic relationships with each other. I love the term teeming with life, and that's what you see here. I hear you've got a plethora of microbes in the soil, breaking down feces, urine, making it available to the soil, available to the plants. You've got cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits, chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, ducks that we raise living together in polyculture, symbiotic relationships, one benefiting the other. That's working in harmony with nature. Monocultures will not hold up without using the tools that reductionist science gave us that allows the monoculture to exist. Things like subtherapeutic use of antibiotics, things like chemical fertilizers, things like insecticides, herbicides, nematicides. All these things allow the monoculture to not fail, but it does so with unintended consequences.
When Dad decided to transition our farm from the very commoditized model that we had in the 80s or really 50s through the 1990s, I didn't really think much about it. I trusted my father. Again, it was not something that I had a real opinion on. As long as I was able to still have a relationship with him through it, it didn't really matter. Today, I'm proud to say that it has become my passion, but I'm certain that that passion is rooted in animal welfare and environmental regeneration. Maybe I didn't recognize necessarily how much it impacted me way back when. It took us changing for me to really focus on it. So I think that by changing the way we did business, it helped me find what I think is largely important.
I was born in 1954. And I was raised to be a very industrial cattleman. I loved it. All my life, my friends wanted to be firemen or astronauts, baseball players. All I ever wanted to do was run this farm. I never considered majoring in anything other than animal science when I went to university in 1972. And I came back and was an enthusiastic participant in the industrial beef production model. And but after 20 years of it, for a number of reasons, became focused on the animal welfare side and thought that probably some things I should be doing different. In that industrial model, good animal welfare would be described as keeping the animals well fed and watered and in a comfortable temperature range and safe, and you don't intentionally inflict harm or pain, suffering. And that's what I thought was good animal welfare until I realized that it's also important, it's incumbent upon the herdsman to give them an environment in which they can express instinctive behavior. And that's a game changer. The industrial model doesn't accommodate that. Chickens were born to scratch and peck, hogs were born to root and wallow, cows were born to roam and graze, and the industrial model accommodates none of that.
When Grow returns, Will and Jenny talk about the modern-day food industry and how you can make more environmentally conscious choices when buying food. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Grow. We're with Will Harris and his daughter Jenny on their 6th-generation family farm in Bluffton, Georgia.
One of the reasons that more people don't farm like this is the difficulty of getting our products to the consumers, the small number of consumers who are willing to pay a premium to cover our added cost of production. Very hard for us to get it to them. And that's because in this country, so many people have become, all of us actually, have become so dependent upon grocery distribution and food service distribution at restaurants. And there's nothing evil about either one. We sell product to Whole Foods Market and Publix and Kroger and U.S. Foods and Cisco, and they are all wonderful people. There's nothing evil or nobody in those organizations is trying to hurt me or my farm or this kind of farming. But it is extremely difficult for a farm like this to do business with those people. Not that they want it to be, they're good folks. But the fact is that, and by the way, this is one of the larger farms of this type that you'll find in the country, but still hard for us. And the reason is because grocery and food service distribution and big multinational food companies and big corporate farm companies all co-evolved together. None of them really existed in any large amount until probably the 40s. But starting in the 40s through today, big grocery companies, big food service companies, big multinational food companies, and big corporate industrial farms have exploded. And they exploded together and they co-evolved and those industries built up with a codependency upon each other. You couldn't have big grocery chains operating the way they do now without big multinational food companies. And you couldn't have big multinational food companies without big industrial farms. That's the co-evolution. And while those food service companies, grocery companies are not trying to thwart the way I farm, it's just hard for me to get in. The guys that do the purchasing are used to picking up the phone and ordering 50,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets that are individually packed and identical to each other. I can't do that.
One of the most important things, I think, in supporting the local food system or supporting a food system in general is understanding that food system. You know, when I take a trip through the grocery store, I'm confused, and I do this for a living. You know, marketing is kind of one of the things that I take pride in because it's my responsibility here at White Oak Pastures. And I can go to the grocery store and still, you know, look at the meat case or look, you know, down any aisle and walk out with a bunch of question marks. I think that food systems are designed at some point to confuse people. And so for us, you know, we understand that our consumers want to study exactly how things are done. And I encourage those same consumers to, if they're not supporting White Oak Pastures, who are you supporting and how are they doing it? You know, and how does that affect the soil? How does that affect the animal? How does that affect the community? Those are things that I think separate those who aren't from those who are. And there's no type of marketing that can be any deeper than you having a relationship with your food system. If you're gonna know your doctor and you're gonna know your teacher and you're gonna know all these different people in your life, why not know your food producer? To me, that's the most basic thing.
Consumers will decide. Wendell Berry said that consumers vote with their dollars every day on how they want the world to be. And that's exactly the way it is. No farmer can be so altruistic that he says, I'm going to go ahead and spend more to produce this beef or flour or pork or vegetables. I'm going to go ahead and spend more to produce it because I want to, and it's better. And if the consumer doesn't want to pay me more for it, that's fine. Except it's not. They'll go broke. Because you can't add a farmer, like any other business person, cannot add value to their product if they don't recover that added value from the market to cover the added cost. It won't work. So consumers will decide.
I can't imagine customers researching and learning and becoming so passionate about something and then just kind of forgetting it and going back to the old ways. I believe that what the people who support White Oak Pastures have done is study the food production system and decide the way they want the animals they consume to live and die. And I don't believe that that crowd can ever settle for anything less. I don't think that there's like growing up, I loved baseball cards, but then I got to an age where I didn't really like baseball cards anymore. It wasn't that big of a deal. Or I loved, Beanie Babies, the trend of, and then I got to an age where I really wasn't into Beanie. I don't think that food can do that. I think that people in my generation are aware of the impact that they have, and they want to leave a legacy. They don't necessarily, they're mindful of the shape that they leave this planet to their children. I mean, even just me, who's always been passionate, or I guess who's found passion in animal welfare and environmental regeneration, having a child and knowing that I want this farm to be able to be handed down to him in the same manner it was handed down to me. I mean, we do so much every day that can mess that up. So I think that I'm not the only one that had that enlightenment after having a child. I think that that there are others as well. Eating is an agricultural act. You vote with your dollar 3 times a day. You support it. Demand's born in the marketplace. Agriculture didn't just say, hey, let's become wildly profitable and produce food abundantly wasteful and obscenely cheap. Consumers demanded that. We are where we are because that's what consumers voted for. White Oak Pastures exists because some percentage of the population wants it to exist. We're all in control of our destiny.
Thanks for watching. Go to aibtv.com/donate to support programming like this. All contributions are tax deductible.